Thank you for joining us today. We would like to begin our talk event. Aichi Triennale 2025. We now have about 1 year to go before it's held. And this time, the artistic director and also the participating artists who were just announced on the 12th. We wanted them to talk directly to you, who are looking forward to the holding of Aichi 2025, and we decided to hold this talk event. So let's go right into it. I would like to introduce today's speakers on the stage. The Artistic Director of Aichi 2025, Hoor Qasimi. And participating artists, Maitha Abdalla, Koretsune Sakura, Wangechi Mutu, and Michael Rakowitz. And we also have with us the Aichi Triennale 2013, the Artistic Director, Igarashi Taro, who will serve as moderator today. And today, towards the end of this session, we have time for questions and answers. So I would like to hand it over to Igarashi-san. Igarashi-san, please go ahead. Thank you for your introduction. My name is Igarashi Taro. At the Aichi Triennale 2013, I was the artistic director. So that's why today I will be serving as moderator. And there are people who are meeting us for the first time today, so I'd like to briefly introduce myself. Regarding architecture and cities, I look into the history. That's what I mainly do. And I also do planning for exhibitions. I do a lot of that as well. And right now in Tokyo, there are two things that I'm planning. There are architecture exhibitions in Nihonbashi and Akasaka Mitsuke. The day before yesterday, the two exhibitions opening were held on the same day, so I had to go from one to the other. So I do planning like that. And Aichi 2025, about a year ago, so now we're about 1 year before the start. The other day, there was a news conference, and many new participating artists, about 30, I think, were introduced. And today, from among them, also to do research, we have artists in Japan. We have 4 artists from outside Japan joining us on stage. And the artistic director, Hoor Qasimi, she's been good enough to join us. So far, in Nagoya, she has had some opportunities to speak, but this time she has come to Tokyo, to the metropolitan area, so that she can directly talk with you. So this is a very valuable opportunity for us. And if you have questions, I'm sure you have an opportunity to ask her direct. So I was artistic director for Aichi Triennale 2013. And the theme was Awakening. Where are we standing? Earth, memory, reconstruction. After a major earthquake hit Japan, in Japan, there was a large artistic festival. And we had that strongly in mind when we thought about the contents. So we thought what was clear, the foundations were greatly shattered. And there was the earthquake, tsunami, and also an accident at the nuclear power plant. And based on all of that, the location and memories, those were big themes. And also reconstruction. From art, what can art do? That was what we looked into. And all over the world, there are a variety of crises. That was also a theme. Next year, at Aichi Triennale 2025. The Aichi Triennale is now in its sixth round, and when there are even numbers, sometimes we see society waver. So it was the second time in Aichi when I was doing it, and there was an earthquake. And the fourth time, Tsuda Daisuke was the artistic director, and fake news was abundant, and freedom of speech regarding this. There was a big discussion going on. And this time, with Hoor, she has given us a theme. And in one respect, you could say it's a world-scale theme. There are a lot of things going on across the world, and that was the timing with which she came up with this theme. The title is A Time Between Ashes and Roses. That's the title. And this time in the flyers, too. Igarashi Daisuke has come up with wonderful visuals. And that you can see that on the flyers. And in that visual as well, you can see roses. You can see a rose and the image of ashes. And directly, destruction and rebirth or reconstruction. So ashes and roses, and in between. The poet Adonis, after the Six-Day War, he wrote a poem, and that's where it comes from. And these words, they're very poetic. They bring our imagination to life. But first, I'd like to ask Hoor to talk about what's behind this theme. Would you like to go ahead?
ありがとうございます。Thank you for being here. Sorry, I'm going to speak in English because it's much easier at the moment. You're right, it's very true that the theme, A Time Between Ashes and Roses, is very poignant now with everything that is happening. But we grew up with all of this happening in our part of the world for a long time. The poem by Adonis from 1967 talks about how could you blossom? How could withered trees blossom after everything is destroyed? How do withered trees blossom after a whole destruction? A time between ashes and roses is coming. So the idea is about rebuilding and imagining a new future. Of course, the people in Gaza are always rebuilding, and their cities are always being destroyed. And it's really very, very hard to imagine a new future, but we hope one day they will be free and that they'll be able to live in peace. It's really important when you think about the earthquake, destruction, war. All of these are also ecological crises. You know, how does one live within humanity? How do they live with the animals? How do you live with your species? How can you overcome when there is a constant destruction? Looking at Osamu Tezuka's manga, Next World, you know, looking at the fight for nuclear power and who is going to save this world from destruction. It's important to be optimistic. It's very hard, but it's also important to know that these things are happening across the world. The civil war, there's a civil war in Sudan, the genocide happening in Palestine, the genocide in the Congo, the occupation in Kashmir. The whole world is affected, and I'm hoping through this exhibition that we'll be able to highlight as many voices as possible so that the world could be more connected. It's only through coming together can we really understand each other and try to come up with a better future. So in saying that, I'm very happy that I have a lot of artists here visiting on site. We've been doing a lot of site visits in Seto City and in Nagoya. We were at the Seto Mono Festival yesterday also, which is amazing. The artists that I have on stage, I will introduce a little bit later, but we have some artists also in the audience with us. Minerva Cuevas from Mexico City has been here for quite a while, doing a lot of research. Oki Junko, who spoke last time as well, is here with us today. Christodolos Penaitu, and Tommy Yasuyuma. And the performance group Alta, who are invited by the performing arts curator Nakamura Akane-san. I would like this opportunity just to give each artist a minute or two to just say something about their visit and their preparation for the Triennale, if possible. Minerva, shall I start with you?
Hello, everyone. Well, hearing Hoor talking so directly about the current issues that probably are in our minds, I would like to add something in relation to my work that sometimes is seen as very social or politically oriented. And when I'm asked what do I think is a solution to get out of the system, I often respond that is community. It's not a different economic system, but very much reinforcing community, and that would connect as well with international communities. So I think it's time to remember internationalism, and these kind of exhibitions precisely do that in a very poetic, aesthetic way, and through projects that not always can be described with words, but more with sentiments. So I thank Hoor for the invitation. I'm very happy to be in Japan for the first time and connect Mexico with historical Japanese artists. Thank you.
Yuma-san.
My name is Tomiyasu Yuma. I'm very pleased to be here. Yes. Recently, I visited Seto City to do some initial research. I was able to take a look at a great many things. And the Seto mono that's made from the soil, from the ground, you really feel the land and the ground beneath you. And as Director Hoor was mentioning, and in a sense talking about living creatures and things which are broken, looking at what is in between those two, what is that resonance between those two, and what is in the in-between. That's something that I think that we're really focusing in on, and I have a great deal of empathy for that. So that in-betweenness, I hope that I can show in my work. I hope I'll create something that will express that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hoor. Hi. Hello, everybody. My name is Christodoulos Panayotou. I'm from Cyprus. And I have not much to add to Hoor's introduction. I'd like just to say that I'm very happy to be here. It's not my first time in Japan. I came quite spontaneously after Hoor's recent invitation with a specific idea, which happened to become 3 other ideas. Which we will hopefully reflect upon and develop in the next months. Thank you very much, and thanks to the Aichi Triennale team for their great hospitality.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Oki Junko. Thank you very much for having me here today. I was invited on this occasion, and I'm deeply honored that I was. As Hoor-san mentioned a moment ago, every day in the news and the media, you don't know whether it's being reported correctly or not, but every day there is so much that really moves my heart. And I ask myself every day, what should I do? At the moment, for myself, the conclusion that I've reached, or what I think I can do, is that, first of all, just really deep dive into what is personal to me and how can I communicate that to everyone. So my works are in embroidery, needlework. So I try to face up to female or gender challenges, but it's about deep diving into myself personally. I don't know where I'm going to go with that yet, but with the opportunity that I've been given on this occasion, I hope that I'll be able to show something good. So thank you so much. So from Alta, my name, we are joined by Chanchi here, Megu Ninja, Inoue Toru, Saito Takafumi, and Hasegawa Yoshiro. That's the 5 of us. We are participating in the performing arts section of the Aichi 2025. So thank you for inviting us. So we are a theatrical work, we are performing arts. We've already begun our research phase. We're working in Kitakyushu and in Fukuoka City. We're looking at mines around those areas. Looking at coal mining in those areas and the laborers who work there, the history of that, there's a lot of deep history. We're particularly looking at how women were involved in coal mining, how they were actually extracting coal from the ground back in the day, and how that links to contemporary times is something we're really interested in right now, and that's what we're researching. In the present day, there are a variety of challenges that we face, and I hope that in that context, I want to see how that ties back to me, links back to myself. I hope that we can create a work that allows people to bring that back to the individual again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'm going to pass the mic back to Igarashi-san to continue the discussion.
Thank you very much. So these were the artists who were not on stage, but we have had a word or two from the other artists who are in the room, who are in the venue. So there's a variety of different approaches that are being taken, and one of the things that are characteristics of Aichi Triennale is that performing arts is something that is included. That's been from the first time that it's been held, so that's part of what we'll be doing for next year as well. So, Hoor-san, if you read the word that she's included, the document that she's included in the program this time, it's a very long document. I think there's that much passion in there. So the way that I would interpret what she's written is, I think, into 3 things. The first thing is about nature and humanity and the environment and the relationships between those, particularly in terms of chronology over time. The second point would be about war. Right now, with Russia having invaded the Ukraine and Israel and Palestine, that war continuing, there are, in real time, wars happening around us right now, ongoing. So that, I think, is encapsulated in that second theme. And recently in Nagoya, where the news conference took place, colonialism was one of the themes that was picked up. So there's the narrow definition of colonialism, but not just that we are limiting ourselves to. We're talking about relationships between countries which are remote to one another. This imbalance between the disparity between those countries, the extraction that is used between them, the power relationships between them. This may not be in the case of historic colonialism, but even today there is a form of colonialism that is continuing. It's a very large theme.
And today we have 4 artists on stage. And in the past, in Japan, there are those who have shown their works in Japan, others who are in Japan for the first time. So, one by one, regarding your activities, regarding your works, I'd like to hear more. So first, Wangechi Mutu. Let's ask her. So, Mutu, can we show images of her work? She's from Kenya. She's an artist. And she's involved in sculptures, installations. She's famous for this. And in Japan, this is a little while ago, in 2006, at the Mori Museum, at the Africa Mixed Exhibition, she took part. And currently, she's based in New York, at the New Museum and other places. She has been holding exhibitions. She's very active. And in Japan, it's been a long time. We haven't had an opportunity to see her works. And next year in Aichi, we'll have an opportunity. So I'm really looking forward to that. And as you can see on the slides, so the human body motif is there, but it's hybrid. There are different animals or parts of the body that have changed, been transformed. And recently, there was the new Alien series that was released, and there human beings and aliens were fused together. These were like post-human expressions. And in her work, there's sometimes things that are a bit shocking, that make your heart beat a little faster. And with these works, what is she trying to express? So, what are you trying to express through your works?
Thank you very much for the question, and I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's hosted us in this incredible visit, both to Nagoya and to Tokyo. And I'm extremely excited to be here. It's my first time in Japan, so it's been an incredible visit, very hot and very active, but extremely well taken care of. And in fact, this feeling of collaboration and community that has surrounded me in these last few days is very much at the core of my work. And I'll answer the question you've asked me by saying I left Kenya to study art in the States, United States, in the early 90s. And I think a lot of the ideas that I pursued way back then as a student have continued. And they have a lot to do with the nostalgia and the feeling of missing home. And home for me was where I was raised in Kenya, in Nairobi, where city life was really interconnected with the life of this incredible, beautiful natural world that we have in Nairobi. In fact, Nairobi is the one city in the world that has a huge national park adjacent to the city. So you have all of the buildings and the fast expressways, but you also have this incredible, I guess in a way, partnership with nature, because you have these incredible animals, the zebras and the giraffes and so forth are right there next to you, and they're very dignified creatures, the trees, the animals in this national park. So to live next to them is to live with an enormous amount of respect, and I think, and respect for them, and they respect your space as well. And I think that was the kernel, the seed that was planted in me, that I used to start this idea of hybrid and connection to nature. And so a lot of the smaller watercolors that I did early on were of women, women either who were wounded or mutilated, and somehow at the same time combined with these creatures that had this sort of incredible power. So these crocodiles or these hunting dogs and so forth. That mechanism and that ability and that love of conflating nature, animals, mythical creatures with the female figure has continued as a way of describing the potential for women, the potential in our bodies, the potential in our imagination, and also the hope that we can, I suppose, conquer some of these really difficult challenges that women, and especially African women, are faced with. So I think that's a way of explaining why this work has a sort of a kind of a frightening juxtaposition. But really it comes from the fact that I absolutely love and admire and always fascinated and intimidated and curious about nature. And I do see that the only way forward, just to honor your words, Hoor, is to really find a way to live together, not to find new ways to combat and outdo one another, but to find a way to work in solidarity, and solidarity amongst species, amongst cultures, amongst histories and so forth, which is much harder to do than we say. But this show, I feel, is probably the way that artists go about tackling this kind of issue, and that's how the work happens for me. It's really an attempt and a hope to put more love, to put more power, to put more femininity in the world through these gestures and through these kinds of sculptures and performances.
Thank you. Earlier on, in the waiting room, you had sketched out your plans for the exhibition. I had a quick peek. And this time, at the Ceramic Museum, I think you've taken a tour there. At this point in time, I'm sure not everything is decided, but what do you think is possible? What do you think you might be able to do next year?
Next year, what will I be able to do? Well, you know, what I hope to do is what I love to experience when I go to exhibitions, which is to create a space, an immersive environment that allows the viewer to be completely lost in their minds, in their thoughts, in their dreams when they enter the room. I'm a big believer that art has the capacity, like books, like films, like music, to transport the viewer, the audience, and especially if the intention is really to uplift and to guide the mind somewhere new. I love traveling physically, but I also love traveling mentally. And so what I'm hoping is that I can create a space that the audience walks into and is enthralled and captivated, and to really create a poignant memory. I love remembering a place that I've been to because something about the visual, the smell, the look of the place is powerful, is beautiful, and really and holds and captures the memory. So I hope to work with the sculptures to guide the mind through the places I go to, and then in the films, I'm hoping that we can sort of create an environment that feels very much like a haunting, beautiful dream space. So let's see if we can get that done next year.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that. So very briefly, from Hoor, regarding Mutu's works, what expectations do you have? Could we have a few comments, please?
Well, of course, there are many works of Wangechi's that I'd like to show here, but we're not able to bring everything. But I'm hoping that you'll be able to experience the amazing film work, video work that Wangechi does, but also the ceramic sculptures and bronzes. Yeah, I think I have no doubt that we're going to have something really beautiful. I just hope that we can get the support and be able to produce the exhibition that we want to do. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Wangechi-san. Next, I'd like to turn to Mr. Michael Rakowitz. I know that in the Yokohama Triennale in 2014, you participated in that. And back then, I think it was director Morimura. We worked on a theme from Ray Bradbury's novel. So I think that was the theme that he chose at that time. But I think that, the burning of books is part of that theme. And loss of Bamiyan, and I think that there is this destruction of culture. Cultural destruction, I think, was something that we've seen in works that have been created, and also looking at your personal origins. I understand that you have an Iraqi Jewish heritage from your grandparents, and that you've looked at some of the culinary offerings from that heritage, and that you've done some performance based around that. So in that sense, in the United States, when you talk about somebody with an Iraqi Jewish heritage, I think as artworks have been produced, I'm sure that you've had a great deal of impact and influence in what you've been doing. But up to now, in terms of the works that you've presented, how have you taken that on board is what I wanted to hear a little bit more about from you, please.
Can you rephrase that at the end? I'm not sure I totally understood. Sorry.
Yes, of course. In your work, looking at destruction of culture, I think there's been a number of occasions where that's been a theme that's been in the works that you've presented. You personally, I understand, live in the United States. Your roots, your heritage, I understand, are Iraqi Jewish. So you've faced up to that. I'm sure that there is a relationship between those two things, your heritage and that cultural destruction in your work. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Arigato, moshi moshi, konnichiwa. It's nice to be here, and thank you to everyone who's made this possible. It's really an honor to be with you all. Well, I think that the way that I've approached the destruction of cultural heritage has been one that's been intrinsically with me. As the child of two Jewish parents who were born after the Holocaust, one of the things that you learn is that when books burn, people burn too. So oftentimes the symbolic realm is targeted simultaneously or before the atrocities occur. We've witnessed this repeatedly throughout history in different places, and of course we're witnessing it now, whether it's the genocide in Gaza and the destruction of sites and culture and families there, and to always tie the object to the lived experience for me is something that I've tried to do in the work. So when we think about objects throughout history that have been shattered or destroyed or looted or have gone missing, they are usually connected to the people who have disappeared. And so a project like the Invisible Enemy Should Not Exist, which we see behind us here, attempts to reappear, not reconstruct, the ghost of the objects that have been looted from the museums in Iraq or destroyed at the cultural sites after the US-led invasion in 2003. And one thing that I noticed was when the museum was looted, there was this moment of pathos that had opened up. It didn't matter in the United States if you were for the war or against the war. There was an agreement that this was a cultural loss for all of humanity. And so when the outrage about lost objects didn't turn into an outrage about lost Iraqi lives, I started to think of this project and to think about them coming back as ghosts but to be made out of not this material that was the original, but from the food packaging and the kind of lived cultural heritage that my grandparents bestowed on us, that I bestow onto my kids, and to show that even with these interruptions and these attempts to completely destroy, life continues. We continue to make our food. We continue to make our culture, no matter where we are. And so it's a project that is meant to kind of serve as a place to not necessarily just remake the thing, but to show that something has been disappeared and its replacement is a scar. And I also think about the way that minor objects can tell major stories. So if we think about the way that the packaging of the foodstuff is somehow related in some cases to Iraqi dates, which were the best in the world, and it's an industry that's been decimated in the environment since the wars. We can also think about, for instance, the rose, which is mentioned in the title. And if we think about a rose, for instance, in Syria, and we think about the Damascus rose, there's a phrase that was that I read from a man who ran a distillery in Duma, who said that Duma used to smell of roses, and now with the endangerment of this one particular kind of rose, the whole place reeks of gunpowder. So what I try to do with my work is to zero in on those things, so it's not just the material culture of what I'm building, but also what we're smelling, what we're tasting. And so these objects for me are always tied to community, which is something that I also try to reappear.
Thank you very much. So I think you've been to Seto City in Aichi to do some research already, and I understand you saw a baseball game, the Chunichi Dragons. You became a fan in Nagoya. That was something that I heard. So through your research, I'm sure that what will lead into the work that you produce. But do you have right now a sense of what you'd like to attempt, what you'd like to try? Any ideas you can share with us?
Clearly, yeah. So I'm being told I'm not allowed. But what I can say is that I hope to be present in the Triennale. I feel like I've been welcomed so warmly into Nagoya, and also especially into Seto City. And my hope is that I can do something that will live up to the hospitality and the absolute kindness and beauty that has been shown to me. So I'm very grateful and very excited to make something new.
Thank you very much. So, Hoor-san, perhaps you can say a few words about what your expectations are for Michael.
Yes. So I've worked with Michael for a very long time, and what I know is that Michael is able to bring many people together in different ways, be it through food, through talks, through coming together, music, baseball. So I think what I'd like to happen is really, Michael has spent quite a little bit of time in Seto, but already understands the location of where his project is going to be, and we're hoping to create something that's going to welcome people to come and spend time and gather and be able to communicate and just be together. I think there's a lot that we can all learn from each other, and I think Michael's going to create a space for that.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Michael. I'm going to move on to Maitha Abdalla. So, Maitha, I understand that within the United Arab Emirates, domestically, you have exhibited, of course, but also in the UK, you had an individual exhibition, and in 2023, you had an exhibition in the Triennale. So, I think the works that you've done involve a lot of different media, paintings, film, a variety of expressions, and you have a great deal of story in what you do. And again, I see that this is very unified in terms of the performance. And when we look at the image of your paintings, for example, there's a lot of bodily, physical, anatomical. There's a lot of feeling there of physicality. So in terms of how you produce your works, or in terms of that physical or bodily movement, how does that, to me, it looks like it very directly ties in with your work, but how do you approach the creation of your works?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm incredibly honored. It's my first time in Japan. I didn't know what to expect, but the kindness and the hospitality were amazing. Thank you, Hoor, and thank you, the team, for just being amazing and kind. And I like to call myself as a storyteller. Since I was young, I was always drawn to stories. I remember the first memory of stories were told by my grandmother, whom I lived with her for a very long time, since my parents used to travel a lot to study. And she used to tell me and my sisters a lot of these folklores and different beliefs. And she lived in a farm that had a lot of chicken and roosters. And one of my first memories of her saying, whenever you hear a rooster, ask God for forgiveness because there are angels around. And as I grew up, I remembered that, and whenever I hear a rooster, I could imagine, there are angels around. After I turned 18, I started this journey of trying to discover myself as a human being and an artist, and I started traveling. This kind of took me to a thought of what is right and what is wrong, and how do I leave a place and then start this journey and start discovering myself without, and what do I carry with me from the place that I left. And with that thought, I started thinking about all these folkloric tales and characters. And then the rooster had entered my work. And similarly, the pig as well. So you can see in one of my works where it had a rooster and a pig. And the rooster to me represented the right and the light and the forgiveness. And on the other hand, the pig in the region is a sinful animal, therefore representing a sin and the dark. And I have them usually in my work taking over a humanly body. And they're either in conversation or in a fight or intimate, in a very theatrical way. So I start by writing these stories and these characters in something that would look like a screenplay, moving these characters around in different mediums, paintings, the sculpture. Sometimes I would perform them or photograph them in a stage. This is what I start with, by just moving these characters into different scenes, and using also experiences that I lived throughout my travel into these stories. Yes.
Thank you. So your exhibition in Japan, this is your first time exhibiting in Japan, I think. And the research, I believe you have started your research as well. I'm not quite sure how much you're allowed to disclose, but in Japan, this is your first exhibition. And regarding the culture is different, the climate's different. And regarding exhibiting in Japan, what are you thinking about? Would you be able to let us know a little?
Yes, well, Japan, I would also believe, is hugely influenced by myths and stories and folkloric tales that had been passed down through generations. And similar to what I do, like the folk tales is filled with these characters, like either godly characters or demons. So I'm kind of trying to understand more about the storytelling here in Japan, and then relating them to the concept. But with my work, I kind of tend to look at the war that is internally happening. And for this exhibition, I would like to kind of discover the internal war that happens in reflect to the war outside. Thank you.
Thank you. So once again, from Hoor, regarding what your expectations you have of Maitha, could you please talk about that?
Yes, well, Maitha's project's going to be in Seto City, so we had a quick look around Seto City. It wasn't quite enough, but I believe that there will be something that is very immersive, that perhaps has a performative element. And I think we still have some time to discover what we could create. But as you mentioned, I've worked with Maitha before and exhibited her work as her sculpture, film, and paintings. So I think there are many, many forms that her practice takes on, and I'm looking forward to doing the project together.
Thank you. So Maitha-san too, thank you very much. So next we'd like to go to Koretsune Sakura. So Koretsune-san, in the past, in Alaska, in Tohoku, in various parts of the world, she has been engaging in anthropologic research, fieldwork, and regarding whales and human beings and the relationship. She's been researching this, and she's been expressing this in her works. And she's quite close to Tohoku University, so she's been taking part of the Yamagata Biennale. I've been watching that. And it just so happens, at an overseas training session of the Cultural Affairs Agency, I was on the judging panel, and we talked about going to Norway. So regarding the contents, she's very researcher-like. And at one point, at Tohoku University, I think she was there at the university. So research. But having said so, she's very researcher-like, but her output is not papers, it's art. That's her output. So research and art and the relationship. And why is it whale catching? Could you tell us more? Yes, thank you. So my research and my art, for me, how are they related? Before going into that, for about 9 years now, between whales and human being, my theme has been the relationship. And I've been doing research and providing my work. So why? It's not whale catching, it's whales. So why is it whales? Looking back, to start out with, I'm from Hiroshima. I was born on an island in the Seto Inland Sea. And actually, in the Seto Inland Sea, up to several hundred years ago, there were whales there. And back then, there are records of whale catching. Or there are are islands that whales visit, and there are legends about that, but still remain. But now you hardly ever see whales. Whales are gone now, but I was born on this island and grew up there, and whales are the link between people and the sea. So that's what I've been hearing. And I was born on the island, grew up there, and since a child I've been going beachcombing or regarding the skin or the bones of the fish that I've eaten. I liked making things. So using materials that were around me, that was where my interest lay. And then at an Alaskan university, I studied art. And in Alaska, at that university, while I was learning about art, regarding the indigenous peoples, I was able to meet people who are engaging in whale catching. And they live in the villages. I visited them there. And after catching a whale, they eat the whale. And that was not simple. So up until catching the whale, there are preparations. You have to build the ship and make the tools. And then to make sure you can catch the whale properly, you sing, you dance, you pray. And the scenery of the people living there, it was created related to whales, and that still continues down to this present day. I learned about this, and the relationship with one animal can change people this much. That was first of all surprising. And whales are part of the food culture in Japan. And I felt that there was something that was a common thread with the people of Alaska and the relationship of people with whales regarding what I know in Japan and also Alaska where I visited, but not just there, but all over the world. I was wondering what kind of stories exist. That attracted my interest.
And also, looking at the world from the 17th century onward, there was considered over-whaling, and that resulted in a number of species becoming on the verge of extinction. And now that we're in the 20th century, we have the problems and challenges around whaling, and there's been bans on whaling around the world subsequently. But right now, when we think about the living creature, whales, the first thing that comes to mind, I think, is the problem of whale catching and whales. But when you look at international whaling, when we talk about that, in the background, in the shade of that, is this no longer spoken of, this mixed regional relationship between whales and people, as well as the livelihoods that were generated in those places and that connection. So this loss or these things which are overlooked, I look at that through my field work, through my surveys. I look at that my own words and my embroidery. I create these small pamphlets, these booklets, and I produce embroidery which goes in as illustrations into those pamphlets. So I try and gather those small stories to look at people who had a very close relationship with whales. I gather their voices to look at what is the presence of whales for people. I'm trying to get back that image. I know that right now whales are a bit of a symbol because of the whaling problem, but I want to step away from that. I want to see what whales are otherwise. So I think, what about that research and art as output of that? Yes, thank you for reminding me. So looking at research and art, within my own mind, I don't think of them as being different things. When I think about research, the activity that I do is research for myself personally. When I look at, it's about enhancing the resolution of the thing that I'm looking at. I'm looking at what I need to be able to see something. That's the activity for me that is research. Thank you. And you've selected and worked with whales as a motif for a very long time. But in the prefecture of Aichi, Aichi and whales don't necessarily immediately come to mind as things that have a relationship. But in the exhibition that you'll be doing for Aichi 2025, Are we able to expect some kind of relationship there? Yes. So from last month, I've actually been traveling to Aichi Prefecture. I've begun my process of researching. And in fact, in Aichi Prefecture, since around the 16th century, whaling has actually been happening. There are records of that still are extant. So it's no longer happening. There's no whaling anymore. But back then in Ise Bay and Mikawa Bay, there used to be quite a lot of whales there in terms of population. And actually from Jomon sites, we've seen that there have been whales that have been excavated. So we be that there's been whales that came into the bay that have been used by people. But then from the 16th century, people went out to sea to catch the whales. So that technology or skills back in places like Kii Peninsula and Wakayama Prefecture, Kochi Prefecture, that was communicated to those places from Aichi. So while in Aichi Prefecture it's not particularly known, in Wakayama and Kochi Prefectures there are records and there are objects which still exist now from that history and that legacy. And also around the edges of Ise Bay in the past, there are festivals that recreate the whaling that used to happen, and there used to be some whaling vessels that used to be used, and they've been restored and created. So the whales have gone, the presence of the whales have gone from the landscape, yet despite that, within the history or within the festivals that you see, there is still this remainder that is left behind of the whales. So there's something that you can take from that. And this time I'll be producing some new work. Back in 2009, in Nagoya Bay, there was actually some whale bones which were brought in, and the whole body has now been preserved in a facility in Nagoya. Right now, it's almost not possible to see whales in the seas around us, but very rarely whales do come inland, come close to us, and maybe the whales are trying to get back their livelihoods that they used to have. Maybe they're coming back to seas that they used to inhabit. It's an imaginative exercise for me, but looking at that single whale's body through that one physical presence, Ise Bay or Mikawa Bay, there is this history, this thread of history that's been coming through, and through the sea there are these skills and song and festival, this ability to meet that again, encounter that again. I hope to create that opportunity. Thank you very much. So through whales, or I guess looking at that relationship between the sea and people in a variety of different ways, I think you can kind of illustrate that, highlight that. So it's highly interesting to me. But again, I'd like to go back to Hoor to hear about what do you have in terms of expectations for Sakura-san's exhibition.
Thank you. Sakura-san and I met a while ago, and I learned so much over our studio visit. I think when you mentioned about the human's relationship with whales and the old ways of whaling and the destruction to the sea because of the new technologies that have come from the West, from Norway, I think it's important to also mention that this also is something that it's about technology coming back and trying to destroy something and over whale, over fish. And I think looking at the relationship between the two species is something that we're trying to reconnect. So I'm really looking forward to that, trying to give, and I think you've written also in your books, you've always looked at the point of view of the whale as well. And I think you'll see in the exhibition perhaps, but Sakura-san's produced a lot of books as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We've had the opportunity to hear from all four of our artists today. So I would like to open this up to our audience today. For example, at the Nagoya Aichi Art Center, that's usually our location, of course, but the other location that we're going to be featuring this time outside of Nagoya is Seto. Seto City is going to be one of the big venues for 2025. Now, personally, I feel that the Aichi Expo happened, I think they used a location in Seto, and that was back in 2005. And thinking about international events in Aichi, you've got the Expo in Aichi, and the Aichi Triennale, I think, is an international event of a different nature, but it kind of inherits that legacy. There is already that flow within Aichi. So it's like, we're going back to Seto City. I get that sense too, personally. So this time, Seto City is one of the venues. Seto City from long ago is a place where porcelain and ceramics have been produced. So the wonderful clay that is produced here is so important. And there are these exposed mines where clay has been extracted. It's almost like a Grand Canyon. It's often get called the Seto Grand Canyon, apparently. So it's a highly dynamic landscape that we have around that city. On this occasion, our artistic director's concept does talk about Seto, talking about the Seto mono production in Seto City, that there are materials gained from what is around Seto City, that this is a local industry using surrounding environments, materials and resources, which will feature in artist commissions. This is a source of local pride, and it is also an alternative model to explore the human-environment relationships. Those are the kind of words that Hoor has used. And also, Hoor wrote about in her concept document that when you create something that is fired, that is ceramics, well, the smoke from the kilns turn the sky black. So she talked about that ashy black skies. And this time the theme, of course, is between ashes and roses. So that ash is not a destructive ash, actually, for the case of Seto City. In the case of Seto City, it actually talks about prosperity. That's what it led to. So this was a really interesting point that I think Hoor was making in her commentary. So my question to Hoor, as artistic director, is one of the big pillars, one of the big locations and venues is Seto City. What is your take on Seto City? What kind of venue would you like to see Seto City become? I'd like to just get your thoughts, Hoor, about what you feel right now.
I think if I had more time and more budget, I would use all of Seto City. But of course, I have to restrict my locations. We're luckily and thankfully, so I'd like to thank the mayor of Seto City as well, who's offered us many amazing spaces that we're able to use. I think you can't, like you said, the ceramics is a source of pride for the city. You can't ignore it. And a lot of international artists are also very fascinated by Japanese ceramics. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity for people to come and be able to see all this work being created. I think there'll be great possibilities perhaps in the future to offer residencies as well. The facilities and artist studios in Seto City are amazing. We've been visiting the same people again and again. Everybody's been very, very helpful. So I think I would like visitors to spend time in Seto City, not rush around, really get to know the place, meet the people, go to the local shops, and just enjoy what Seto City has to offer.
Thank you. When I was the artistic director for the Aichi Triennale 2013, Nagoya City and Okazaki City, there were two venues. And Okazaki, relatively speaking, you can use the station, or you can use department stores, the top floors. There would be no more tenants there, and we'd be able to use those floors of the department stores, or there would be wooden arcades, shopping arcades that we used. In one respect, I am an expert in architecture, so how do we use these urban spaces? Personally, at the Aichi Triennale back in 2013, that was another theme, utilizing urban spaces. And after the Aichi Triennale, There were a lot of, like in Okazaki, after that, there were lots of activities for town building. I hear that it's continued, and this time, in Seto City, there's a ceramic museum that is being used as the venue. We're using the Seto City as well. But we are also using the Ceramic Museum as a big venue. And the Aichi Prefecture Ceramic Museum, is there a photograph? No? Taniguchi Yoshiro, architect, designed the building. And Taniguchi Yoshiro, this architect, is the father of Taniguchi Yoshio. The Toyota City Museum, it's a very beautiful museum. And he's the father. He's an architect too. And modernism and Japanese-like elements, they've managed to blend it quite well. He's very good at that kind of design. And this building will be used as a venue. It's one of the big pillars. And this too, we hope to focus on this as well. And this time, here, so Wangechi, you will be exhibiting here, and I'm sure you've come up with your plans. So at the Ceramic Museum, what are your first impressions visiting the Ceramic Museum? What do you think of it as a venue? What do you think?
Thank you for your question. I don't know if I can answer that succinctly enough, but because really the experience in the last few days is all blended into one big warm memory. And I have to say, the thing that intrigues me the most about the Seto area is how this incredible clay, this mud, this mountain has been turned into all of these utility objects and these, incredibly made, intricate bowls and cups and memorable human-scaled objects. I'm always fascinated by how we interact with the earth in small and big ways. And we had a chance to walk around and tour and see the architecture, the roads, the fencing, the various parts of Seto that have been transformed by the mountain, and the mountain has been, in a way, reduced by human activity into this scattering of beautiful man-made, human-made items. So what I'm hoping is that I can, add to this already transformed space, very, very ancient ceramic destination or space. And I honestly have to just go back to what I said before. I really hope I can create something memorable, something that is intriguing, something that is unusual, with the collaboration and the work that we do with Hoor as the curator. I know we will manage to make something that is a destination, a place that you want to come back to again and again. I think all of us artists who've met we're dying to see the location, the place, the space, the thing that we will make that we want to come back to. So art is made to carry our friendships, our emotion, our memory forward, so that we have something to hold on to and to keep in our hearts. So I'm hoping I can achieve that somehow.
I'd
Yes,
also
please
like
go
to
ahead.
say about the Aichi Prefecture Ceramic Museum, I'd like to thank Sato-san and Masa-san for also inviting us from the very beginning before the renovation started. If I hadn't visited so early, I wouldn't have been able to see and imagine artist projects in that space. And in my many visits, I've seen the duration of the renovation, and it's starting to look really amazing. And very happy to be in your space, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we still have a relatively good amount of time left, so let's take questions from the floor. This is a wonderful opportunity, so let's take questions from the floor. Please raise your hand if you have a question. So please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. Yes, over there. And please wait for the microphone to reach you.
I would just like to compliment you, Your Highness, because I've been following your career from when you first started with the Sharjah Biennale, and you've been a pioneer throughout and pushing the envelope, pushing the edge. And the last Venice Biennale could have learned from your theme and title of how to bridge and move on. And the selection of artists from Arab to Jew to African to European, you are a visionary and a pioneer in not only in the art world but socially. And I'm very honored to be here. Thank you very much.
I think, what I'm trying to do is, I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. So I grew up as a painter in London, an Arab woman painter in London. In my country, it's normal to be a woman and be successful. But I went to study in London and I realized there wasn't space for people like us. So I decided there's Sharjah Biennale. I visited Documenta and I thought Sharjah Biennale should be like this. It should be the place. Because I was inspired by Sharjah Biennale. I didn't create it. I grew up with it. I learned from it. I learned from all the artists who visited. It started when I was 13, so I was not the founder, although it'd be a great story, but I was not the founder. And I learned from every single person, and I continue to learn from every single person I interact with. But I realized we have to create spaces for each other. And for me, that's really what my mission is. People ask me, do you miss making art? No, I don't miss it, because this is my art in a way. I didn't study architecture. I was close to it, but I transform spaces. I work very spatially. And I have huge admiration for the people and artists that I've met in my life, and I continue to work with them because I believe in the work that they do. So it's always collaborative. So thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, I think somebody had a hand up over there. Did you, I think? Great. Yes, thank you for taking my question. We had some really proactive, forward-looking statements from you also. Thank you. So my question is, for all of you, when you talk about cultural anthropology or history, I feel like you have a lot of ties in those fields and those areas. I believe that Hoor, in terms of curation, this is something you've actually given a great deal of deep thought to, and that's the reasons why you're making those selections. So I wanted to hear more about that, because as a Japanese person, when you think about people from outside of Japan, international people and their backgrounds, we feel like there's a lot of difficulty in backgrounds of people who are not Japanese. So when you come up with statements or documentaries and documents. I'm sure that those are going to be produced from here on in, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about that, please. And also, in Japan, my other question is that, for example, Arabian Nights, 1001 Arabian Nights, or the Gilgamesh stories, in those kind of things, that's the only thing that's really known in Japan. So other than that, what else should we inspire by? What else can we be shown is something I have great expectations about.
Thank you. I also want to say I've met some amazing Japanese artists. Not all of them I could invite to this Triennale, but I think this is also an opportunity for me to see great work and the bridging of artists, Japanese artists and artists from other countries coming together is also very important. So I'm grateful to all of the curators who helped me and organized studio visits for me. In terms of stereotypes or stories that you hear, I'm sure it's the same the other way around. I'm sure you also think that people internationally also only know very little about Japanese culture as well. So these are opportunities really to learn more about each other and just discuss whatever you want to discuss. I think it's good to be open and be very frank, and if you don't understand something, just ask about it. And it works the other way as well. We're all continuously learning. Nobody's an expert in anything.
Yes, go ahead. We have a hand up in the room.
Thank you, Hoor. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your insight. When I read the statement, I find it quite significant. It started with a quote of Adonis, started with a quote of a poet in today's world. Because the title itself, too, A Time Between Ashes and Roses, when I read the title, I can't help but think about the world and time that we're living today. The magnitude of calamity, destruction, and cynicism that we got to face every day when we get up. It's overwhelmingly. I personally find it quite difficult to just get up and face that, overwhelming sense of powerlessness that's hitting us for quite a while. And in a moment like this, I wanted to ask you all how we can possibly sustain our belief in poetry, in the arts, and in expression of individuals. It's getting really difficult for me to believe in such things. Though I want to, it's hard not to think, poetry is barbaric at this point, when facing such a calamity, continue while we have no way to stop it, really. So, sorry for bringing in such kind of negative energy, perhaps, but I just wanted you to ask how we can hold on to the belief I wish we share.
Wow. I feel exactly the same as you, and I think that that's one of the reasons why what we do as artists, which often doesn't make sense to anyone, is a space where we can have something that at least allows us to locate one another and to know that what the pain that exists in you exists in me and all of us, and to know that art is a space that does actually go beyond language. There are certain kinds of speechlessnesses that we all find ourselves in, the ineffable, of being able to express any kind of language around an atrocity. Art provides a space for that as well, where we can't quite know exactly what it is that we're looking at sometimes, but it does it in another way, that it's not war, but it is something else. And I'll never stop being grateful for that space, that it can be seen as barbaric at a time of genocides, and when those genocides are actually not acknowledged. But the Palestinian poet in Gaza, who was murdered earlier this year, or in the conflict, or the assault. And I feel very bad that I'm not remembering his name right now.
Rafat.
Okay. He said, if I must die, you must live. And so we have a duty, I think, to carry those people with us and to move forward. And art for me will always be one of those spaces that has created an escape. My wife was very, very ill more than 10 years ago, and we were not very sure if we were going to make it, and luckily we did. And I remember being in those rooms in the hospital where the radiation tests would happen or the chemotherapy tests would happen, and there wouldn't be any windows in those spaces. And I would be in a waiting room. And in those waiting rooms, I would be stuck looking at the most boring watercolors. But I was very, very grateful for those boring watercolors, because it was as if somebody had actually punched a hole through that wall and allowed me to see something else. So I don't think we can discount what it is that we do as artists in a moment like this. I don't have a thesis on it, but all I know is that if someone else must die, then we must live, and we must continue to do the things that are in their memory and continue to do the things that they would have done if they were with us.
I also want to thank you for sharing your emotions and feelings with us. I think it's important that what you can do is to continue to talk about it. Not everybody sees what you see every morning on your phone, on the news. So maybe it's important to share that and show other people. And the more people that know, the more our voices will be louder. And I think that's the least that we can do. But thank you so much for sharing your feelings with us.
Thank you. I think there's somebody at the back with their hand up. Thank you very much. Today, I just happened to be here. I happen to be from Aichi Prefecture, and I saw the event and I thought I must attend. Normally, I live in Tokyo and I work in generative AI, and I work with businesses, municipalities, educational institutions. I do training and launches, and I do development and solutions. So when you think about AI and art and industry, the combinations of those, I wanted to ask about that. From my perspective, for example, digital art, we see out in the world the use of generative AI. Yes, it can be used for that. And also, for example, in industry, I think that there's a lot that people should do, humans should do, but passing on the traditions and the legacy, I think there is a role to be able to use AI and the technologies to do that. So when you talk about, the latest technology like AI, generative AI that I use, looking at the latest technology and art and technology and industry, if you multiply those things together, cross those things together, and the trends that might come from that, I wanted to hear a little bit about your thoughts on those subjects, please.
Yeah, Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on AI and digital, but I'm still not an expert. I'm finding it very difficult, to be honest. I'm a painter, sculptor. I like film. I'm finding it very difficult working with AI. I've worked with some artists who've worked in new technology, but I'm not an expert, and I think it's fine not to be. I think people, are very different, but there's so much that is happening. I can't guarantee that you'll see any of that in this Triennale, and I'm also grateful to be in Seto City, where it's also looking at, traditional art and crafts that are really connected to the land, to the hands, and to people. I think it's important that we're moving so quickly, going to space, going to the moon, to Mars, and producing flying cars. I think we need to get back down to earth and just connect again.
Thank you. Maybe we are starting to run out of time. Are we still okay for time? So let's take one final question then. I have a more specific, concrete question this time. So Aichi Triennale 2025. In the past, at the Aichi Triennale, like 2019 or the others, what's different this time? If there is something different, could you let me know? For example, this time you're starting in September. In the past, I think it started in July. It was really hot. And we're really happy that you are starting in September. And more specifically, what's your theme color going to be? I've been wondering about your theme color. And in the past, is it going to be like a dialogue type learning, like in the past? If you can talk about it, could you let us know, please?
Yeah, it's
still quite hot.
I think, of course, moving it to September, as we can see, climate change, global catastrophe, the earth is boiling and melting. I think in terms of colors, we're really looking at pink and gray, so rose and ash. It's very muted, it's not very loud. I think it's very poetic. I'm very grateful for Igarashi Daisuke for creating this beautiful drawing for us. I really wanted to commission a manga artist to do the design because I think it's something that is so beautiful about Japanese culture. A lot of people are interested in it. It's popular culture. It brings everybody, children, adults, people from all walks of life. It doesn't matter if you're a boss or somebody working at manual labor. Everybody can appreciate a beautiful manga like this. So looking at some of the works, thanks to Kazuho Soeda-san, I really got interested in his work, Children of the Sea, and decided to invite him to produce this beautiful work for us. So it's very soft, it's very poetic. I think that's kind of what you can expect. In terms of what's different, I think every edition is different because you have a different artistic director, you have different artists. So maybe what is different this year is that we're here and you'll see something new.
Thank you. I think we are pretty much out of time. So regarding points for improvement, holding it in September was a good idea. And we thought maybe there'll be fatalities in the hot heat. In the past Aichi Triennale, we've been worried about people falling dead. In August, it was really hot. And we have to walk around in the city as well. And that was quite tough as well. But now we've brought it to September. And it's going to be much easier to enjoy the works. And this time, in Japan, there are artists who have not been introduced in Japan yet. There are going to be many such artists. That's another thing to look forward to. And earlier on, there was a question about the Aichi Triennale, and I was involved in 2013, and there was the East Japan earthquake right after that. So in Japan, regarding art, what can art do? Back then, lots of people questioned that. But personally, I'm an expert in architecture, so architecture, design, and the difference with art. Once again, I had to think about that. And architecture, design, especially architecture, so creating and building the town again, or design directly, it's useful immediately. Doing that, that's the kind of area it is. But art is not necessarily immediately convenient. It's not immediately useful. That's not art's most important point. And moving people's hearts and minds, or working on the emotional aspects. Back then, at the time of the earthquake, people talked about records and memory. Records are just numbers. How many people died, or how many buildings were collapsed. It's just these hard numbers. But it's not records, it's memory. And that's where art can play a big role, and long-term. It's not a short-term vision. Over a long period of time, art can continue to work, and that's where the power of art lies. And back in 2013, that's what I was thinking. Next year, in our exhibitions, to a certain extent, I think we're going to see something close as themes or as issues. And over a broader area, on a global scale, we see a variety of issues, and many artists will be showing their approach. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. So here, I think we have run out of time. It's 3:30. So I would like to end my moderating of the talk session and give it back to the MC and to the participating artists and to Hoor and to everyone else. Thank you very much for taking part. And now let me give back the microphone to the MC. So once again, Hoor and all the participating artists and Igarashi Taro, thank you very much indeed. And once again, could we have another round of applause for everyone, please?